Coming up today, Korea's rival parties trade barbs over the intensifying surveillance scandal engulfing the nation's spy agency. The main opposition is demanding a parliamentary-level hearing on the matter. With no new MERS cases in 2 weeks, the Seoul hospital, widely seen as the epicenter of the outbreak, resumes full operations for the first time since mid-June. Plus, an 8th round of trilateral working-level talks on a free trade agreement between Korea, China and Japan kicks off in Beijing. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Monday, the 20th of July. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. And we start with the political row that is escalating over the death of a National Intelligence Service employee, which has its very strong links to the intensifying surveillance scandal engulfing the spy agency. A 45-year-old spy with the family name Im was found dead in his car on Saturday with a handwritten note denying allegations the NIS meddled in the 2012 presidential election and wiretapped citizens. The apparent suicide note came soon after the NIS admitted it had purchased a hacking program from an Italian malware company in 2012. You can see the suicide note there. Now, the main opposition, New Politics Alliance for Democracy, is calling for a parliamentary-level hearing and a visit to the NIS to investigate the mysterious death, saying it could reveal the truth about the spy agency's alleged involvement in the presidential election back in 2012 and possibly the illegal wiretapping of citizens as well. The ruling Senator Party, on the other hand, asserts that lawmakers should refrain from exploiting the incident for political gain, as it could jeopardize national security by revealing too much information about the NIS. More than 2 weeks have now passed since Korea reported its last case of Middle East respiratory syndrome, or as it's otherwise known, MERS. On top of this, all MERS-affected hospitals are now running normally. After the final one, Samsung Medical Center got the green light to reopen properly in the early hours of this morning. Connie Kim has the details.
With the outbreak of the Middle East respiratory syndrome nearing an apparent end, all hospitals affected by MERS are now back to operating normally. Samsung Medical Center in southern Seoul, considered the epicenter of the virus, is fully operational as of Monday after lifting its partial temporary shutdown that lasted more than a month. 91 people, nearly half of total MERS patients, were confirmed to have contracted the disease while at the hospital. Seoul's MERS response headquarters said no additional traces of the virus were detected in hospital wards and the emergency rooms where MERS-confirmed patients were treated. Adding to the good news, the National Medical Center, the forefront of quarantine and treatment of MERS patients, has also started to receive outpatients and patients for hospitalization. As of Monday, quarantine measures for all 15 hospitals have been lifted. With Korea seemingly back on track to recovery before the outbreak, the government will promote awareness of the viral disease during its briefing session for diplomatic corps in Seoul on Monday. The government is expected to promote Korea as a safe country to travel to during the second session. The first session, held last month, focused on government response measures and an accurate account of the MERS situation in Korea. The first MERS patient was confirmed in late May, and since then, 186 people were confirmed with the virus, with 36 deaths. The figures have remained unchanged for the past 15 days. Officials say it could signal an end to the MERS outbreak as early as next month. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
Now, the MERS outbreak in Korea, which, as we just heard there, seems to be winding down now, hasn't been putting people off from travelling by air within Korea. According to the Korea Airports Corporation, the number of travellers on domestic flights came to 13.2 million during the first 6 months of the year. Now, that's up more than 13% from the same period 1 year ago. Ticket sales reached $1.3 billion Last year, that's up 10% on year, and it's expected to reach almost $1.5 billion this year. The upward trend is in contrast to inbound international passengers, which saw a huge decline in the wake of the MERS outbreak. Industry watchers expect demand for domestic tours to grow in the second half. Now the MERS outbreak appears to be over. The leaders of Korea and Honduras are looking to bolster their country's 53-year-old diplomatic relationship and boost cooperation in politics, the economy, infrastructure, development and education. Meeting in Seoul earlier today, Presidents Park Geun-hye and Juan Orlando Hernandez also discussed how they can together address issues concerning Northeast Asia and Central America. The Korean Presidential Office says the Honduran leader's decision to choose Korea as the first Asian country to visit since taking office last year reflects his interest and will to strengthen two-way ties. Now, today's meeting also comes after President Park's Latin America tour back in April and a recent launch of Korea's trade talks with 6 countries in the region, including Honduras. Another round of working-level talks on a free trade agreement deal, this time between Korea, China and Japan, has kicked off in Beijing. If this deal is signed, it will represent Korea's first trade pact with Tokyo. Shin Se-min reports.
A new round of working-level talks for a free trade agreement involving Korea, China and Japan is well underway, with the 3 countries looking to hammer out any remaining differences. It's the 8th time the countries have met for trilateral talks of this kind, and the talks are expected to last 1 week. Korea's trade ministry says the 3 countries will discuss issues like modalities for lifting tariffs and ways to free up the service and investment sectors. Depending on the results of the talks, the chief negotiators will meet in China sometime in September for their 8th scheduled meeting. The 3 neighboring countries originally announced plans to begin negotiations in November 2012 and have since been planning comprehensive trade deal discussions. Seoul has a free trade deal in place with Beijing, but not with Tokyo. In 2004, Japan's opposition to liberalize its agricultural market put bilateral talks with Korea on hold, suspending a total of 6 rounds of bilateral negotiations. If the proposed deal is signed, it will be Seoul's first trade pact with Tokyo. Seoul is also considering entering a U.S.-led regional FTA, also known as a Trans-Pacific Partnership, with a dozen other countries, including Japan. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Hyundai Motor and its affiliate Kia Motors grabbed 3rd spot in terms of hybrid electric vehicle sales around the world last year, according to data released on Monday by Japanese auto research firm 4In. The 2 Korean automakers sold nearly 77,500 of these environmentally friendly cars in 2014. They trailed behind Japanese manufacturers Toyota with sales of over 1 million units and Honda with 279,000 units. Now, Hyundai and Kia have been seeing a rise in their global hybrid car sales since they launched the Avante and the Forte LPI 6 years ago. The automakers plan to increase their lineup of eco-friendly cars to 22 models by the end of 2020. Korea's strong exports have kept the economy ticking over relatively nicely over the past few years, but a combination of external factors have dented outbound shipments in recent months, and no one really knows when or if they'll pick up again. Some analysts say the government and Korea's private sector have to change with the times and come up with new strategies to turn the tide. Kwon So-ah reports.
Has the glitter gone? Posting negative growth of 5% in on-year exports so far this year, the combination of external factors such as the debt crisis in Greece and China's stock market meltdown are expected to hurt domestic exporters even more in the months to come. The effects are also being felt on the street level.
Vendors at markets like this, sitting right next to the world's #1 shipbuilder, are directly feeling the effects of hardships Korea's manufacturing sector and exporters are going through.
This married couple is a classic example. Song Bum-mo works at Korea's biggest shipbuilder Hyundai Heavy Industries, and his wife Ta Hwa-sun owns a small restaurant in a nearby market.
When the company was going through good times, the markets here were bustling, but they aren't anymore as new export orders have been on the decline since the end of last year.
So many shops have closed down. Everyone in this area is struggling.
During the first half of the year, Korea's ship exports tumbled by a monthly average of more than 42% on year. Some experts say Korea might lose its #1 spot to China soon.
China is enforcing its policies in the domestic market. We need to reduce our dependency on China and broaden our export markets. Korea should also put greater attention on the United States as we expect to see the U.S. economy pick up a head of steam going forward.
Other strategies include bringing overseas-based manufacturing bases back to Korea to enhance production domestically. However, making matter worse, on top of dropping exports, the added value of Korean exports has been shrinking too. These factors are stoking concerns that the days when Korea's export-oriented strategy worked wonders could be over. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Now, Japan's foreign ministry is known to have expressed concerns to Prime Minister Shinzo Abe during negotiations between Seoul and Tokyo over the UNESCO listing of Japan's industrial sites. Tokyo-based Kyodo news agency reported Sunday that Abe had ordered the ministry to accept Korea's demands after it suggested Japan may not have gotten approval from the 21 member states of the UNESCO World Heritage Committee. The ministry expressed concern, saying that many member countries were sympathetic to Korea's appeal for acknowledging forced labor of Koreans at those sites during the colonial period. The report said that during negotiations between the two countries on June 19th, Korea demanded that Japan mention that Koreans were, quote, forced to work, which Abe agreed to in late June. The historic nuclear deal reached between Iran and the United States, along with 5 other world powers, has been sent to US Congress for review. American legislators now have 60 days to pass or veto the agreement. Republicans have already harshly criticized the pact, with many of them vowing to reject it. As someone who did so much to tie up the agreement, US Secretary of State John Kerry defended the deal during an interview with CNN. He warned that if the Republican-led Congress kills the deal, the world is not going to have another chance to negotiate with Iran, leaving the country to do whatever it wants with its nuclear program. The landmark agreement, struck last week in Vienna, calls on Tehran to significantly limit its nuclear program in exchange for the removal of economic sanctions. Now, concern is growing in countries like South Korea, Japan and the United States that China's recent economic instability could negatively impact their economies. But according to a recent study, the country that will be the hardest hit is North Korea. Son Jong-in has more.
North Korea's high dependency on China will take a toll on the communist state should the Chinese economy fall apart. This, according to Seoul's Korea Institute for International Economic Policy, which released a report on Monday. The report said North Korea's exports to China accounted for 72% of its outbound shipments from 2009 to 2013. The country's imports from the world's second-largest economy accounted for more than 77% during that same period, most of them being daily necessities like oil, corn, and flour. This is in stark contrast to South Korea, whose trade volume with China makes up only about 20% of its total trade with the rest of the world. North Korea's trade with China has grown at an alarming pace over the last 4 years, mostly due to the surge in demand for raw materials. In 2013 alone, its exports to China rose more than 17% compared to a year earlier. However, the volume sharply declined following China's economic slowdown last year, dropping by 2.4% from a year earlier, mainly due to a fall in demand for major export products like iron ore and hard coal from China. Experts say that amid recent volatility in China's stock markets and slower growth, Pyongyang may not only face economic damage but also political instability if it fails to find alternatives for China. Son Jung-in, Arirang News.
Now, Korea's female golfers are continuing their unbelievable run of results. This time, Chella Choi captured her first LPGA title at the Marathon Classic in Ohio on Sunday local time. The 24-year-old broke through on her 157th start on the tour, defeating fellow Korean Jang Hana with a birdie on the first playoff hole. In addition to the healthy winner's check of $225,000, Choi's world ranking is projected to jump to 25th from 40th. The victory also makes her the 4th consecutive Korean winner on the tour and the 7th overall this year. Those 7 players have combined for 11 wins in 18 events in 2015, and this ties the record for the most number of LPGA wins by Koreans in one season, first set in 2006 and last equalled in 2009. Well, those have been the stories we've been following on this Monday afternoon here in Seoul. For more of the latest, don't forget to check out our website, arirang.com, and do download our smartphone application for all the latest news and programs. Have a wonderful day. Goodbye.